Exercise 13 deals with the endocrine system. This, remember, is one of your communication systems. It's a little slower to get activated and get moving, but the response is going to be longer lasting as compared to the nervous system. It does involve the release of hormones, it involves chemical signaling. Those hormones are going to be produced in your endocrine glands in one location, but then transported by the blood to another location to where it will then stimulate the specific target cell. It does respond to changes in the internal environment. It's trying to help maintain this balance of the internal environment, so it's responding to changes in that. It's helping to try to maintain the homeostasis. It can also, some of the hormones are involved with helping to control reproduction. In terms of the structure of the endocrine system, it involves the endocrine glands. These are ductless glands, meaning you have the gland, but there's no duct, like what you saw with the integumentary system, where we say you have the sweat glands that have the duct that extends from the gland up to the surface. Endocrine glands don't have that. They will secrete hormones, and those hormones are secreted directly into that interstitial fluid, that fluid between the cells, and then the blood transports it, as I said just a bit ago, to the target cell. Some endocrine glands, keep in mind, do have more than one function to them. Now, the hormones, there's two main categories or types of hormones. Number one, you've got your steroid hormones, where steroids are going to be lipids. This uses cholesterol as a template. That's one of the reasons why you need to have some cholesterol, because it's used as a structural component, like in the plasma membranes, but it's also used as a template for making some of your hormones. And then the other type of hormone other than steroid are going to be your protein or your amine hormones that essentially are using amino acid chain of that as its template. So basically what's going to happen is the body is detecting some type of an imbalance, and the response to that is going to be to release a hormone to adjust or correct whatever that imbalance is. Usually this is going to involve negative feedback, where, say, something is getting too high, so you're going to prevent or inhibit to decrease the levels to bring it back down. So this shows in this drawing the location of your various endocrine glands. There are a few of them that are located up in the brain. You've got the pineal gland and the pituitary gland. Notice the orientation if you were to see a diagram. I know they are small, it's hard to see, but the pituitary gland, as labeled right here, is always going to be more anterior right here than what the pineal gland is back here. The thyroid is in the neck area. Below that's the thymus. Keep in mind the thyroid, normally you see the front part of it, but on the back side you have the parathyroid. Then on top of the kidneys, you've got the adrenal glands. Between the kidney area, you do have the pancreas. And then for women, you have the uterus, and to either side are the ovaries. And for males, you have the testes. So when we look at these kind of briefly, the hypothalamus, as we saw with the nervous system, it was involved, but it does have a dual function. It is also involved with the endocrine system because it helps to maintain homeostasis. So when you see hypothalamus, you should be thinking homeostasis. That's one of the first things that should come to your mind. The hypothalamus is connected to the pituitary gland by what's commonly referred to as a stalk or the infobedulum. The hypothalamus itself will produce two hormones, the oxytocin and the antidiuretic hormone, or the ADH. You'll notice that we tend to abbreviate a lot of the hormones, but please know what those abbreviations stand for. Now what happens is the hypothalamus will produce these two hormones, oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone, but then they are secreted and stored in the posterior pituitary. And over here, you can see the diagram showing the hypothalamus in kind of that turquoise color. The infraepidylum is in the orange. The pituitary has two lobes, an anterior and a posterior. So as you can see here, the purple is the posterior, and that is where the hormones produced by the hypothalamus will be stored. Now, the anterior pituitary produces 7 different hormones. Now, some of these hormones are called tropic hormones. And what a tropic hormone is, its purpose is to either turn on or off other endocrine glands. So we will see that. Now, if we go back and look at the hypothalamus, producing hormones, storing them in the posterior pituitary gland, the oxytocin, what's the purpose of this? Well, it's going to help during childbirth. It stimulates the contractions of the uterus, basically triggering a woman to go into labor. It's also going to be involved with the milk ejection reflex. Antidiuretic, or ADH, a diuretic is something that basically is going to essentially stimulate more urine production. It's going to make you go pee. And so an antidiuretic, in this case the antidiuretic hormone, what it's going to do is decrease the amount of water that is being placed in the urine, and instead it's increasing or stimulating that water reabsorption by the kidneys. In other words, in the formation of urine in the kidneys, you pull a lot of water out of the blood. And what if the ADH is stimulated, what happens is it's going to put a lot of that water back into the blood to help keep you from getting dehydrated, and the end result is you're not going to pee as much. Now, alcohol, we know, will inhibit this hormone, which is one of the reasons why, if you happen to, let's just say, partake of a lot of alcohol, why do you often feel dehydrated later? It's because you may notice you're drinking a lot of alcohol. What does it do? It's going to make you go to the bathroom a lot because you're going to be producing a lot of urine. So basically, you have to go pee all the time. Well, you're losing a lot of water, and that's what makes you dehydrated. Someone who is suffering from diabetes insipidus, what is happening is they're not producing enough of this antidiuretic hormone. Therefore, they have concerns with becoming dehydrated. And this is just showing a diagram of the production of these hormones and how it goes to the posterior pituitary. Now, the anterior pituitary, as I said, produces 7 different hormones. It does produce the growth hormone, or GH. This, as the name implies, helps promote growth of all body tissues. It does also produce TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone. So this is an example of one of those tropic hormones where the pituitary is producing a hormone that then is stimulating another endocrine gland to produce a hormone. So it stimulates the thyroid hormone to be released from the thyroid. It also produces ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, that stimulates hormone being released by the adrenal cortex of the adrenal glands that sits on top of the kidneys. Another hormone it produces is the follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH. As the name implies, it's going to stimulate gamete production in the gonads. Gamete are your sex cells, gonads are either the ovaries or the testes. Luteinizing hormone, or LH, stimulates androgen production by either the testes or the ovaries, and it also helps to trigger ovulation in females. Beta endorphin, this is a pain suppressor, and then also prolactin, that helps to promote milk production from the mammary glands. Now, there is a connection or space between the anterior and posterior pituitary lobes, and in this area, there's a hormone, the melanocyte stimulating hormone, helps to stimulate melanin production in those melanocytes. The thyroid gland, this located in the neck, there's 2 lobes. It's connected by what's known as the isthmus. The production of thyroid hormone is dependent on iodine. If you do not have iodine, you are going to be lacking in the production of the hormone. For this reason, iodine is automatically added into certain substances that we know that all people tend to take, and so it's in salt. T4 and T3, thyroxine and tritiothyronine, help to stimulate your metabolic rates. Calcitonin, this is going to help reduce blood calcium levels. So the calcium levels are monitored very closely in the blood, and if it gets too high, then calcitonin is going to be released, and then basically it's going to trigger several different mechanisms, such as let's put more of the calcium into the matrix of your bones. So this is showing where the thyroid gland is. Like I said, the calcitonin, that is going to reduce those, bring those blood calcium levels back down. It inhibits osteoclast but stimulates osteoblast. It is going to increase calcium in the urine, and it is going to decrease the amount of calcium that's absorbed in the intestines. If the blood calcium levels are too high, you don't want to take in even more and put it in the blood. The parathyroid glands, these are 4 small little glands. They're on the back side or the posterior side of the thyroid gland. Remember, the thyroid gland, we just said, has 2 lobes, so there's 2 of the parathyroid on each lobe. It produces the parathyroid hormone, or PTH. This now is opposite of calcitonin. It's going to be secreted in response to when blood calcium levels are too low. And so it's going to stimulate osteoclasts to start breaking down bone and releasing the calcium from the matrix. It's going to inhibit the osteoblast in the bone. It's going to increase reabsorption of calcium in the kidneys. So as you pull it out of the blood to filter it, let's put this calcium back into the blood. And then in the intestines, it's going to stimulate production of another chemical called calcitriol, which helps to absorb calcium from the milkshake or ice cream or whatever it is that you are eating. And so this shows the thyroid and then the 4 parathyroid glands. The adrenal glands, these are located basically on top of the kidneys, divided into the cortex and the medulla. The outer area is the cortex area, and this tends to respond to very long-term stress. There's, as you see, 3 different subdivisions of it. And then the medulla is the innermost area, and this tends to respond to short-term stress. So in this diagram, you can see the kidneys with the adrenal gland located on top of it. So in the adrenal cortex area, that outermost long-term stress, the zona glomerulosa produces mineralocorticoids. These an example is aldosterone, which helps to regulate sodium and potassium levels. It's going to be responding to low blood volume or low blood pressure. The zona vesiculative produces glucocorticoids, these such as cortisol, which helps to inhibit tissue building. It stimulates breakdown of stored nutrients. It helps to inhibit the inflammatory response. And then some of the androgens are produced by the zona reticularis. So here's a diagram, the picture showing the different areas or zones and what hormone is released from that area. The adrenomedulla responds to short-term stress. It involves the sympathetic nervous division. This is where your epinephrine or norepinephrine is going to be released. It helps to stimulate the liver and skeletal muscles to convert glucose so you can increase those blood glucose levels. Why do you need that? Because you need to break it down to get ATP. You need to stimulate muscle and be prepared for muscle contraction to occur. It's going to trigger increase in heart rate, pulse rate, blood pressure. It's going to dilate the airways so you can get more oxygen in. It causes vasodilation in the lungs, brain, heart, and skeletal muscles to all assist. Remember, with that sympathetic response or the fight or flight response, that you want to increase the oxygen, increase the blood flow so you can get that oxygen to the muscles so that you can potentially increase muscle contraction for either fighting or running. It's going to cause vasoconstriction of areas such as the gastrointestinal tract, kidneys, skin, immune system. You're not worried about breaking down food items right now. You're worried about survival. It tends to also trigger dry mouth, loss of appetite, but dilate the pupils. Why will it dilate the pupils? Remember, you want more light in so you can be visually very much aware of everything in your surroundings. The pineal gland produces melatonin, and melatonin is derived from serotonin. This is going to be involved with some of your sleep-wake cycle. Light tends to inhibit the melatonin production, and that's kind of what helps keep you awake. Dark tends to stimulate melatonin production, which tends to make you tired. And so on this diagram, I know I shown it earlier, but this is a larger one to show, because a lot of people will confuse the pituitary and the pineal gland. So this down here is the pituitary gland. Remember, it's off of the hypothalamus, and then way up here, this little guy is the pineal gland. This is the front or the anterior view, and this is the back or the posterior view. So if you see the one that's on the back side, that is going to be the pineal gland. The testes produce testosterone, and inhibiting testosterone is responsible for development of the male reproductive system and the maturing of the sperm cells, as well as development of the male secondary sex characteristics, which we see developed during puberty. Inhibin secretion helps to stimulate the secretion. It stimulates the follicle-stimulating hormone, which helps to secrete or stimulate spermatogenesis, which is the production of the sperm. In the ovaries, you've got estrogens, progesterone, and inhibin. The inhibin is involved with the follicle-stimulating hormone, which in turn is part of the process for ovulation to occur. Progesterone helps to regulate the menstrual cycle. It helps to maintain and prepare for pregnancy. And estrogen helps with the development of the female reproductive system. It helps with regulation of the menstrual cycle as well. It helps with maintaining pregnancy and development of the female secondary sexual characteristics, which we see appear during puberty. The placenta does help obviously maintain the pregnancy, but it produces some hormones that are helping and assisting with maintaining that pregnancy. It does produce HCG, or the human chorionic gonadotropin. This helps to promote progesterone production during the pregnancy. It also does kind of help to inhibit an immune response against the fetus. It helps to prevent from the mother's side of recognizing the fetus as something foreign. So it helps to inhibit that. This is what is often referred to as a pregnancy hormone, the one that you test for to see if a woman is pregnant. The human placental lactogen, this helps to prepare the breast for lactation. And then relaxin is another hormone that's produced by the placenta that helps the pubic symphysis, is the area in the front of the pelvis bone, down in the pubic area. It helps to soften that and widen that arch. All of that is helping to prepare and ease for childbirth. The pancreas produces several different hormones. These hormones are produced often by different cells within the pancreas. The alpha cells producing glucagon. This is going to help increase blood glucose levels. So when glucose levels are too low, this glucagon is going to be released, and it helps to convert glucogen to glucose. Glucogen is a storage form. Insulin, which is made by the beta cells, it helps to decrease blood glucose levels. So when blood glucose levels are too high, then the beta cells increase production of insulin, which helps to break that glucose down to get the levels back down. Somatostatin is made by the delta cells. This helps to inhibit insulin and glucagon release, so it's part of a regulatory, because you don't want them always being released. It has to be tightly regulated. And then pancreatic polypeptide, or made by PP cells, this plays a role in your appetite. So all this is with the pancreas. And this is showing a diagram of the pancreas tucked under and behind the stomach. When you can see the various cells that are listed here, the alpha, the beta, etc. cells.